Hey guys, it's Ted Bogert with the TED Show. I'm with Monique Worrell. Monique is amazing. She is running for state attorney, and I've had her on the show in the past. And then some of the questions that came up, I got to give her all the credit, but we wanted to talk more about the job of a prosecutor, the power of a prosecutor, the impact of what exactly a prosecutor has on our community and can have in a positive way rather than the negative that we see all the time. And so Monique has been kind enough to agree to do a little mini series here, Power of the Prosecutor, so we can educate people. We want people to know. I mean, we all want change. We're all in this to make some real, true, intentional, impactful change. And believe it or not, there's an ability here from the state attorney's perspective, prosecutor perspective. And so I'm very excited to have Monique back. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be back. And, as I've been on this campaign trail, I have heard people say, I never knew that a prosecutor did that. I didn't know what a state attorney did. I didn't know what the role was. So I put together a series so that I can let people know. And what better time to do it right now that we're in election time
Right.
and you, the voters, have an opportunity to decide who's going to be your next prosecutor and whether or not they represent your ideologies.
Exactly. And I think that state attorney, for me, who's not in that world, I really didn't understand what that even meant. What is a state attorney? How does this impact me? And in reality, it has the potential to impact all of us in a positive way. Sometimes the prosecutor's office can be looked at mainly because in a negative way, mainly because I think people don't understand what can be done. And so you can watch SVU and Law and Order and all that, but it's really good to get the nitty gritty in your own town, your own city, your own area, and kind of figure it out. So uh, everything is up to you. I'm going to ask questions, and Monique is going to educate you all. And believe me, I'm going to learn right along with you. So with that, Monique, will let you dive in.
It's important, one of the things you just said, because people do watch Law and Order. I am a huge Law and Order
Me
fan.
too.
If someone were to call my phone right now, you would hear I have the Law and Order ringtone, and I've had that for like 15 years, right? So I'm a huge fan of Law and Order. But one of the things that sticks out is that in Law and Order, it's in New York, and in New York, they have district attorneys. And in Florida, we don't have district attorneys. So that's something that's very different and is a source of confusion. I am originally from New York and I have a lot of family and friends in New York. And when I say I'm running for state attorney, they think I'm running for the position to be the attorney for the entire state. And
Correct.
here in Florida, that's called the attorney general. The attorney general is the attorney who handles the legal issues for the entire state. In Florida, we have 20 judicial circuits. The Ninth Circuit covers Orange and Osceola County. And I am running for state attorney for the Ninth Judicial Circuit. And that's just here in Orange and Osceola County. Now, some circuits cover one county, some cover more than one county. In the Ninth Judicial Circuit, we have Orange and Osceola. So
That's a
that's
big
one thing
area.
that, yeah, it's a cause for confusion. People don't understand what that means. Orlando is one of those places that has a lot of people who come from other places. And what you know a state attorney to be in your place of origin may not be the same thing that it is here.
Correct. I did not know that till you just explained it. Now I know why we don't use the terminology district attorney, because that's what you're used to on Law and Order.
Right. And you watch Law and Order, and it means the same exact thing, because if you think about it, I'm saying that I'm going to be the attorney for the Ninth Judicial District, right? So it is a district attorney, but here in Florida, we call them state attorneys.
Love it. See, I learned something again. That's why
Well,
we have to do
awesome.
this. The more education that we give, the more people understand when they go to vote, when they talk about their public officials, the better. We're all better when we're educated on the things like that. Even basic terminology, if you hear it and you don't understand it, then most people will just turn it off.
Right.
And it's so important they don't.
Right. Well, I'm going to try to share my screen with you.
Okay, so you tell me when you're ready. You ready?
I am ready.
All right, so guys, so what we're gonna do, I'm here, Monique's here, and I'm gonna ask questions, and Monique's gonna kind of present, give us some ideas. I think you're gonna want to know this information. Actually, I know you are, especially this year with everything that's going on in our world. State attorney has some amazing power to make some positive impact on what's going on. So with that said, I'm going to change it up. And there you go. You are on.
All right. Can you see my screen?
I can see it. Functions and duties.
All right. So I put together a presentation for you all. And so you know a little bit more about me. I was a law professor for 17 years. And when I say I was a law professor, I don't mean that I stood in front of a podium and taught people for 17 years. I did that too, which is why I put together this PowerPoint presentation as a source of information for you. But I actually trained lawyers to become state attorneys and defense attorneys. And I went with them to court and helped them to gain their skills, as well as taught them the applicable law in this field. So as a trial lawyer, because I am a trial lawyer, I was able to train future attorneys how to practice in the criminal field.
Love it.
So,
all right, here we go. Hold on. Yeah, there we go. Now you're back. Now I've got the screen up again.
Okay. This presentation is one of those things that I would have done for my law students. So the American Bar Association is a voluntary bar association that sets the roles and responsibilities for attorneys. And the information that I'm going to be giving this morning or this afternoon comes from the American Bar Association standards. So the standard number is 3-1.1 and 2, and it's called the functions and duties of a prosecutor. So these standards are intended to provide guidance for the professional conduct and performance of prosecutors. They're written and intended to be entirely consistent with the ABA rules. Those are the rules for professional conduct that lawyers have to follow. They are aspirational and describe best practices. So attorneys who follow these rules are considered following what are the prescribed best practices by the American Bar Association.
Hey, Monique, before you go, we have a question. I'm going to put it up.
Awesome.
So give me a second. Let me pull this out, and then let me show you this question. Mike Cross, please explain why this district has more false convictions. I'm thinking he's speaking, so it's probably false convictions than any other in the U.S. Most attorneys think the state attorney office is out of control.
Wow. Well, let's just get right into it. That is an amazing question, and I'm going to come out of the PowerPoint here for us to talk about that. I was the founding director of the Conviction Integrity Unit here in the Ninth Judicial Circuit. The Conviction Integrity Unit was founded for the purpose of investigating wrongful convictions. And in establishing the unit, I traveled around the country and I studied wrongful convictions in this country so that I could put together a unit that could properly remedy false convictions. And what I learned was in this country, we have exonerated more than 2,500 people who were wrongfully convicted and served time in prison for crimes that they didn't commit. But here in the state of Florida, we've exonerated 29 people off of death row. So that means that on 29 occasions, we have sentenced people to death and then came back and said, we got it wrong.
Wow.
Now, I want you guys to really let that sink in, because just think that if we crashed planes at that rate, none of us would fly. Right? None of us would fly. And I know that there's been a lot of controversy over to death penalty or not to death penalty, right? But my thing is beyond that. the death penalty is the law in the state of Florida, and unless the voters decide that they want to change the law, it will continue to be the law. But we have to be responsible about a penalty that can never be reversed. Because once you sentence someone to death and you actually carry out that sentence, and you come back and say that you got it wrong, it's too late. So we have to be responsible in the imposition of the death penalty.
I would love to have a lengthy discussion on the death penalty because of even one life that has been impacted by that and then exonerated is one life too many. And so I'm a big proponent of, I don't understand why we don't, monetarily, I get it. Budget, I get it. But listen, we need to make sure we have exhausted every avenue to prove otherwise. And I hate when I read things about how the prosecutor's office, state attorney, district attorney, doesn't want to run that kind of stuff, doesn't want to go to the nth degree to make sure that that human who is legally going to pay for that is actually the one who did the crime. So
yeah, and a lot of times what you'll hear, and one of my opponents said this in a debate that we've had, that there has to be finality, and the death penalty is finality, and when you impose that sentence, you can't take it back. So as the individual who is fighting to prove their innocence, I don't think you ever tell them we can't fight anymore, because the reality is, there have been people who have filed appeals that have been denied. And then after their third or fourth or fifth or sixth or seventh appeal, some information comes forth to show that they were innocent.
Correct.
And I understand that, for people who see someone who commits a horrendous murder, that the reaction is to want vengeance. But we have to temper that with responsibility. We have to look at our criminal legal system and recognize that there is, one, historical racial disparities in our criminal legal system that make the death penalty even more problematic, right? Because if you go back to, slavery, which is, the founding or the beginning of how our criminal legal system began, we know that people were killed, with impunity, and it was no problem, and it wasn't an issue. And we also know that in our criminal legal system, African Americans are more likely to be sentenced to death than their counterparts of other races. And we know that if the defendant is African American and the victim is white, that the death penalty is more likely to be sought. So these are issues that we have to address, in addition to the fact that here in the state of Florida, we have the highest exoneration rate off of death row. The highest exoneration rate.
Wow. I'd love to. We'll come back. I want you to be able to explain. I would love to do a show on this because I think that people see it in the news. We become desensitized to it. And so there really needs to be some fundamental, basic, foundational changes made to the way that we look at things. But if you're not touched by it, you don't think about it. And that's the unfortunate part. I can't sleep at night sometimes when I think of the people who I know are innocent, I believe are innocent on death row or even in jail for any reason. And I just am so sad that we can't get those people the defense they need, the attention that they need. So I would love for you to come back. You have a lot of comments, and guys, I appreciate it. And I promise that both Monique and I will respond.
Listen, let's do it. I'm here for them. So the presentation is not as important as engaging them. And to the individual who did the last question, to your question about, why, I think that generally citizens have a false sense of security in our criminal legal system, and they believe that it works the way it was intended to. And what I want voters to understand is that in order for it to work the way you believe, you have to put the right people in place that are aligned with your ideologies to make sure that that happens. because historically it has not. And I've been in this system for 20 years fighting for reform and justice. So I can tell you it does not work. And the reason I'm running for state attorney is because I learned that fighting on the defense side, I can only help one person at a time.
Right.
Fighting on the state side, I can implement policies that will change the system and the way that we prosecute drastically.
Well, so you've got a question sort of based on that. What we do to get the police and investigators to answer to their knowing false prosecution.
Yeah. So police accountability is a big topic right now. And one of the series we're going to focus on, police and the relationship between law enforcement and the state attorney's office. But to answer your question, I believe that the reason that a lot of the law enforcement misconduct continues to happen is because it's not addressed. And because the relationship between law enforcement officers and the state attorney's office has been inappropriate. And in my race, I want people to look and understand that 2 candidates have been endorsed by police unions. Now, in and of itself, that's not a horrible thing, unless you look at what police unions do and what they stand for. And what police unions stand for is that they vehemently defend individuals who have been charged with misconduct, regardless of whether or not they're guilty and regardless of how egregious that misconduct is. So, in a situation like the murder of George Floyd, which has become national news and a national issue, the police unions seek to have him acquitted, even though we all saw him murder a man right in front of our face. So accountability is very important. And as state attorney, I pledge not to go after police because all police are not the problem. But I do pledge to go after those law enforcement officers who cannot be trusted to monitor and patrol our citizens because they have a history of violence and misconduct that they have not been held accountable for. And as state attorney, it is my responsibility to keep the community safe, even if that means from law enforcement officers who continue to inflict violence on our communities.
I love what you said. I love the fact that I think people get into an either or. You're either, and I'll say it, you're either Black Lives Matter or Blue Lives Matter. And that is just such a bad place to be. No one in their right mind is saying that. What you're saying is that the people who have demonstrated a history of this violence against alleged perpetrators and the way that they handle it is the issue. Are these people are our police force under tremendous stress every single day? Yes. So is somebody going to crack? Yes. I think that people are just picking the one or the other, and I think it's so wrong. You're going to have a good person make a bad mistake. What you're looking for is the history. How many bad mistakes have there been? How many people have been hurt? How many times have they been written up? And it's like anything that you do, you have to hold people accountable. And I think all you're asking for, and all of us are asking for, is that accountability be implemented and impact whether or not these people get to stay on a job where they're supposed to be protecting us. So I'm a big police advocate, a big Black Lives Matter advocate.
And you can be both.
You
can be both.
Yeah.
You can
and
be
I
both.
think people get caught up in you have to be one or the other, and that's just an unfortunate place, I think. All right, so we got lots of great comments, but no more questions. So I will let you continue maybe for a couple more minutes on whatever the first topic is.
Right. So I think we are getting close.
Let me go back.
Yeah, I think we're getting close to the end of our time together. So I will end with what I think is a great question. What does a prosecutor do, and why should it matter to me? Right. I think that's the crux of pretty much where we are.
And I had no idea before I interviewed you the first time the answer to that question. So it's what you're going to share is very important. Very important.
All right. So I'm going to share my screen, and I have a couple of answers for that. A prosecutor is an administrator of justice, a zealous advocate, an officer of the court, the prosecutor's office should exercise sound discretion, independent judgment in the performance of the prosecution function. The primary duty of the prosecutor is to seek justice within the bounds of the law and not merely to convict. Now, this is important because a lot of people look at prosecutors as that's where you get a conviction. But one of the things that I want to bring is the balance that the ABA has there, in that the prosecutor's function is to seek justice and not merely to convict. And this takes me into one of my issues, which is I'm going to be changing the culture of prosecution, because as it stands now, prosecutors are trained to believe that their sole function is to get convictions. Why do you say that? Because at the beginning of this race, you don't hear them talk about it too much anymore, but at the beginning of this race, my opponents were talking about conviction rates. If you listen to the debates, and God, there's been many, they talk a lot, there have been so many, about conviction rates and how we have a low conviction rate or a high conviction rate, and prosecutorial metrics, how prosecutors are evaluated is based on their conviction rates. If we change that evaluation mechanism, instead of just convictions, and move that towards justice, seeking justice. Well, how do you do that? Because justice is this very, malleable thing that we can't really put our hands on. Well, we can if we look at samples of a caseload and say, why did you send this person to prison? What is your justification? Why did you drop this case? What is your justification? Why did you put this person on probation? What is your justification? And if we evaluate people like that, we can make an assessment as to whether or not a prosecutor is seeking justice, because convictions do not equal justice.
Correct.
And we have to change the mindset.
I 100% agree. I think that people expect the prosecutor. Remember, you're going back to Law and Order or any other show you've seen. The prosecutor is judged, evaluated, reviewed, revered or not revered based on their conviction rate. Right. And that's the wrong way to be. Justice is not conviction. Conviction's not justice. It's an interesting thing and sounds so simple. So next time I want you to talk about how we're going to do that, because I believe that is a fundamental change that has to be made. Then we should talk about how to implement it.
Absolutely. One thing that people need to understand is that conviction rates can be manipulated, right? Because if I'm the prosecutor, I don't have to make a plea offer on a case that I know a person is guilty of. I can force that case to go to trial so that I can boost my conviction rate. That's not justice.
Correct.
That's not justice.
I love it.
So
conviction is not justice. We should have a whole hashtag on that.
Yeah. So if we want something different, we have to do something different. That's the whole premise of my campaign. It's time for a fresh perspective of justice. We can't continue to do the same thing and expect a different result. So I want people to be involved and knowledgeable about what it is that they're voting for and how the prosecutor's function impacts our lives as individuals, as well as collectively as a community, and why it's time for us to do something different than what we've done for decades, because it hasn't produced good results. And across the nation, people are calling for criminal justice reform, and we're not immune to that. The city of Orlando is considered to be either the third or fourth highest rate of excessive use of force claims by law enforcement in the country. That's a problem, and we need to do something to fix that. And I am running to do just that. So I thank you so much for this platform and for your viewers who are so engaged. And I look forward to continuing this series over the next several weeks.
Yes, we're going to do it next week as well. And I'll send out the times. How do people reach you if they want to ask more questions or want to talk to you about your campaign, Monique?
Yeah, so you can find me at moniqueforstateattorney.com. It's MoniqueFor stateattorney.com. You can find me at Monique for State Attorney on Facebook and Elect Monique State Attorney on Instagram. And I will be happy to engage with you there, answer any more questions that you may have, and just kind of keep you informed of where we are and what's going on and how I am the best candidate for this time.
Yeah. All right, Monique Worrell, thank you so much. Next week, guys, look for the promo, but definitely reach out to Monique in between. She's very responsive. Thank you so much for sharing that today. It went beautifully.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. All right, guys, we'll be back later on. Reach out to Monique if you have any questions or want to get involved. Bye, guys.